They will not tell you this openly, but the world has always feared those who teach themselves, because the self-taught do not inherit the chains of obedience. They forge their own weapons in silence. A man who learns without permission is a man who cannot be easily ruled. He is dangerous not because he is violent, but because he no longer believes in the necessity of masters. The system cannot domesticate one who educates himself, for such a mind does not wait to be authorized. It moves, questions, and builds without consent. And in politics, nothing is more threatening than a citizen who does not ask for approval to think. Power demands predictability. Institutions function not on truth, but on control. They prefer the educated over the intelligent, the trained over the curious, the obedient over the wise. The educated man serves the structure that taught him. The self-taught man sees through it. He understands that authority often disguises its weakness as virtue. He recognizes that what is called the common good is often the consolidation of power under moral disguise. The self-taught does not consume ideas, he interrogates them, and for this, he becomes unfit to serve any master who rules by illusion. When you learn outside their temples, you become aware of the machinery that sustains them. You see how reputations are minted, how truths are manufactured, how obedience is rewarded and rebellion sterilized. They will call you arrogant, extremist, ungrateful. But these words are merely instruments of containment, a way to isolate the independent thinker until he either kneels or starves. The system does not fear ignorance, it thrives on it. What it fears is discernment, because discernment exposes its fragility. Every empire, whether cloaked in democracy or tyranny, depends on a silent pact between the rulers and the ruled. You will believe what we tell you, and we will protect you from chaos. The self-taught breaks this pact. He refuses to outsource his perception. He questions the narrative that keeps the weak docile. He reads the forbidden histories, compares the contradictions, and arrives at conclusions that make him inconvenient. He becomes, in essence, ungovernable, not in the streets, but in the mind. Understand this. Systems are not sustained by the brilliance of their leaders, but by the conformity of their followers. 1,000 minds repeating the same approved thought can maintain a regime longer than 1,000 soldiers defending it. That is why education has become an industry of obedience. It trains minds to memorize rather than to question, to conform rather than to create. It praises innovation only when it is profitable to authority. The moment knowledge becomes self-possessed, it turns from asset to threat. The self-taught man walks alone, but he walks freely. He owes no debt to the institution that refused him, and thus he can speak without fear of losing favor. Yet freedom has a cost. To think independently is to bear the loneliness of seeing clearly in a crowd of blindness. The wise are often condemned not because they are wrong, but because they reveal truths that others have built their peace upon denying. The system will tolerate rebellion as theater, but never as awareness. You will notice that those who climb highest in such structures are rarely the most capable, but the most compliant. The truly capable are too dangerous. They might rewrite the rules that keep others dependent. Power prefers mediocrity because it is predictable, and predictability sustains order. The self-taught disrupts this equilibrium. He introduces uncertainty into a hierarchy that feeds on stability. He becomes an anomaly that must be corrected through ridicule, censorship, or quiet exclusion. What is called the system is not a conspiracy of men, but a self-perpetuating mechanism of fear and incentive. It rewards the tame and isolates the wild. It feeds the illusion that conformity is virtue, that success means acceptance, that the crown belongs to those who never question its metal. Yet history is written by those who refuse to bow. The self-taught become founders, reformers, heretics, prophets. They are burned, exiled, or erased, and then, centuries later, their names are used to inspire the very institutions that once condemned them. The system hates the self-taught because he reminds the world that permission is an illusion, that the gatekeepers only exist because people forget the gate was never locked. He exposes that the boundaries of the possible are political inventions, not natural laws. He knows that every empire begins with a man who learned alone and ends when its rulers forget how to learn at all. The rulers know this truth, but fear its echo. They know that the moment individuals reclaim the power to think, the chains of control begin to rust. Therefore, they flood the world with distraction, reward vanity, and disguise slavery as comfort. They prefer citizens who debate trivialities while their freedom decays quietly. The self-taught man does not participate in this theater. He studies the script and walks off stage. The true education of power is not in what is taught, but in what is forbidden. The forbidden knowledge is not mystical. It is simply the knowledge that reveals the motives behind virtue, the economics behind morality, the architecture behind faith. To understand these is to dismantle the illusion that binds nations. The self-taught does not destroy society. He merely sees it as it is. But in a world addicted to deception, truth becomes a form of violence. So when they call you unqualified, remember what qualification means. It means you have been measured by their scale, fitted to their purpose, and declared useful to their end. To be self-taught is to escape that measurement. You are no longer a cog in the empire, but an observer of its gears. You may be outnumbered, but you are not outwitted. The system thrives on dependency. The self-taught thrives on solitude, and between the two lies the eternal war for the human mind. Power will never love those it cannot predict, and the self-taught, by his very nature, is unpredictable. He does not respond to propaganda the way he is expected to. He does not worship the idols built by collective insecurity. He studies, learns, adapts, and in doing so, becomes a mirror that exposes the incompetence of his rulers. The system will try to break such men not with swords, but with silence, by denying them recognition, by making their wisdom irrelevant in a world addicted to noise. But the silence of the wise is never permanent. Every generation that forgets to think must eventually be rescued by those who still can. The system hates self-taught people because they are the architects of its eventual downfall. Not through revolt, but through revelation. They build new orders from the ruins of the old, guided not by ideology but by clarity. And clarity, that rare, blinding light, is what power fears most. So if you would rule, learn alone. If you would survive, think apart. If you would see the truth of nations, step beyond their teachings. For the world belongs not to the obedient, but to those who can see its machinery without flinching. The system hates you for this because it knows that once you master yourself, you are no longer part of it. And that is the beginning of all real power. When you begin to think for yourself, you trespass into territory guarded by invisible laws. You no longer speak the language of dependency, and therefore the world calls you foreign. Every self-taught mind must pay the tax of exile, for independence is not welcomed in a marketplace that profits from conformity. The rulers of systems, whether political or corporate, understand that knowledge is not neutral. It is either domesticated or weaponized. A mind that is not trained under their doctrine cannot be trusted to obey their commands. That is why they decorate ignorance with credentials and call it expertise. They reward those who recite the catechism of the age and cast out those who write their own scripture. The self-taught person becomes a mirror too sharp for comfort. His very presence exposes how hollow many titles are, how arbitrary the hierarchies of prestige have become. He shatters the illusion that success depends on permission. He does not ask the world to open doors. He learns how to break them quietly. And the moment others witness that, the illusion of control begins to tremble. Power relies on collective agreement about what is possible. The self-taught violates that agreement. He demonstrates that discipline, not privilege, breeds understanding. That insight, not access, breeds influence. But make no mistake, independence of thought is not romantic. It is war. You will battle isolation, doubt, and the quiet hostility of those who sense in you what they themselves have betrayed. To teach yourself is to walk through the ruins of other people's certainties, to gather fragments of truth without guidance, to learn from failure in a world that punishes it. You become your own institution, your own counsel, your own judge, and yet this solitude refines you into something untouchable, a mind that cannot be bought, a will that cannot be easily bent. Systems, whether nations or networks, survive by converting individuals into instruments. They train citizens to equate safety with obedience, morality with submission, belonging with silence. But the self-taught unlearns this conditioning. He realizes that every law, every rule, every expectation was written by someone who once dared to think alone. To follow blindly, therefore, is to live beneath ghosts. To think freely is to stand beside creators. The system hates this equality of mind, for it collapses its hierarchy. They will pretend to praise independent thinking, but only within boundaries that keep it harmless. They will fund creativity that entertains but censor creativity that questions. They will celebrate innovation when it feeds their economy, but exile it when it threatens their authority. The self-taught man does not play this game. He learns in shadows, he observes in silence, and when he acts with precision not to destroy the system, but to make himself immune to its control. For the ultimate rebellion is not chaos, it is self-mastery. Understand this deeply. Power does not fear rebellion, it anticipates it. It fears awakening. It fears the quiet discipline of those who no longer need its approval. Revolt can be suppressed with violence. Awareness cannot. Awareness spreads like a contagion that no censorship can contain. The self-taught are the first carriers of that contagion. They are the seeds of new orders, sown in the cracks of old empires. And though they are persecuted in their time, history bends eventually toward the minds that refused to kneel. To become self-taught is to accept responsibility for your own perception of the world. It means seeing through propaganda disguised as morality, through comfort disguised as peace, through success disguised as servitude. It means understanding that much of what society worships, wealth, status, reputation, are currencies of control, not measures of worth. The self-taught does not reject these entirely. He uses them as tools, not idols. He learns the art of appearing within the system while remaining outside it in spirit. He wears the mask when needed, not to deceive others, but to protect his clarity. And clarity is dangerous. It strips the world of its illusions and forces you to see humanity not as it pretends to be, but as it truly is, driven by fear, ambition, desire, and the eternal hunger to dominate or be dominated. To learn alone is to learn human nature without anesthesia. You begin to see that every institution, every creed, every noble idea is built upon the same foundation, the struggle for power, hidden beneath words like progress and virtue. This realization can harden the heart, but it also purifies the mind. It teaches you to navigate the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. You will notice that the system always mocks what it secretly fears. It mocks solitude, calling it antisocial. It mocks self-education, calling it arrogance. It mocks doubt, calling it disloyalty. But these are the very traits that protect the sovereignty of the mind. A ruler without these traits becomes a servant of public opinion. A thinker without them becomes a slave of consensus. To remain free, you must learn to carry your independence as both armor and burden. You will not be celebrated for it, at least, not while you live. The world does not reward truth-tellers. It rewards those who manage appearances. But if you learn well, you will master appearances too. You will speak the language of power fluently, yet never worship it. You will understand that politics, like theater, requires masks, but you will also know when to remove yours in private. The self-taught learns to play every role without losing himself in the performance. That is the highest art of leadership, to act within illusion without being consumed by it. So, let them hate you. Let them misunderstand you. Their hatred is proof that you are beyond their grasp. Systems fear what they cannot own, and they cannot own a mind that governs itself. The self-taught man may walk alone, but he walks on the edge of history, shaping it with every independent thought. For when the system collapses, as all systems eventually do, it is the self-taught who rebuild from the ashes, not because they are chosen, but because they never forgot how to think. And yet, to think freely is not to escape the system entirely. It is to understand it so deeply that you can move within it unseen. The fool shouts rebellion from the streets. But the wise man learns the structure of power, its rhythms, its symbols, its seductions, and walks through its corridors as if he belongs. That is the paradox of mastery. The self-taught who survives must learn the art of camouflage. For to announce independence too loudly is to invite destruction, but to conceal it is to gain time, and time is the currency of transformation. The system does not collapse through defiance. It decays through infiltration. The self-taught learn this. They build within, not upon slogans, but upon understanding. They become the invisible architects who reshape institutions from the inside, bending their mechanisms toward purpose while the world applauds their obedience. This is the real strategy of the free, to appear loyal while quietly dismantling the chains. Power, after all, is rarely overthrown, it is outgrown. The self-taught are those who no longer believe in its sanctity, who study its gears not to destroy the clock, but to master time itself. But every mind that frees itself must endure the slow crucifixion of misunderstanding. Those who cannot think for themselves will hate you because you remind them of their submission. You will be accused of arrogance because self-reliance looks like pride to the dependent. You will be accused of heresy because truth sounds blasphemous to ears trained in dogma. You will be accused of cynicism because clarity appears cruel to those addicted to comfort. And yet, you must endure. For the measure of independence is not acceptance, but persistence in the face of rejection. In exile, you will discover something sacred. Solitude sharpens the mind like steel against stone. The absence of approval becomes the forge where conviction is tempered. Those who are never doubted never grow strong. Those who are never cast out never learn how to stand alone. The system isolates the self-taught not to destroy them, but because it cannot absorb them. Its weapons are conformity and fatigue. It wants you to doubt yourself, to crave recognition, to trade your clarity for belonging. Resist this bargain. It is how the free are captured. Look at history, not the official version, but the undercurrents. Every great reformer, every visionary, every strategist began as an exile from convention. They saw the machinery of control from the outside and therefore could manipulate it from within. They understood that the masses worship symbols, not realities, and so they crafted symbols that pointed to truth. The self-taught mind, when it matures, learns this art, how to wrap wisdom in familiar forms so that it may pass through the gates of power unnoticed. That is how thought becomes influence. But influence is a dangerous reward. Once you taste it, you risk becoming what you once opposed. The system is cunning. It tempts you not with chains, but with comfort, recognition, and status. It whispers, use your mind, but serve our order. Lead, but within our rules. Speak, but not too freely. This is the final test of the self-taught, whether he can hold his independence even while holding power. Many fail. They mistake acceptance for victory, forgetting that the system's embrace is often a form of assimilation. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance against becoming what you once despised. The true ruler, like the true thinker, learns to wear two faces, one that the world understands and one that belongs only to himself. This is not deceit, it is protection. To reveal your entire mind to the public is to hand them the weapon of your undoing. The wise conceal their intentions behind usefulness. They speak in the language of the age while working for ends that transcend it. For the system respects nothing more than results. If you master outcomes, they will tolerate your independence. But never mistake tolerance for acceptance. They will use you until your ideas outgrow their comfort, and then they will turn against you. Therefore, the self-taught must learn what every ruler learns: when to retreat, when to adapt, when to strike. Knowledge without prudence is suicide. The world does not reward truth, it rewards timing. The mind that sees everything too early becomes a prophet, and prophets in their time are crucified. Wait, build, endure. Let your understanding mature until it moves not by emotion but by precision. The self-taught who endures long enough becomes not merely a dissident, but a strategist. And strategy is the highest form of freedom to shape reality according to one's insight without ever declaring war on it. In this lies the paradox that few comprehend. The system hates self-taught people not only because they resist control, but because they reveal control as unnecessary. Their very existence proves that human potential is not the gift of authority, but the birthright of will. They show that intelligence needs no permission, that greatness can emerge from isolation, that mastery is born from obsession, not instruction. This revelation is intolerable to every institution built upon dependence. It exposes their sacred structures as elaborate prisons designed to protect mediocrity from excellence. The system calls this arrogance. The wise call it truth. For what is arrogance but the refusal to kneel before unearned authority? What is rebellion but the insistence that thought is sovereign? Those who fear such minds will always rewrite history to paint them as dangerous, delusional, or mad. And yet, generation after generation, it is the self-taught who rebuild civilization after its institutions rot. They are the eternal antagonists of stagnation, the quiet architects of renewal. So, understand this, and understand it completely. If you are self-taught, you will never belong to the system, and that is your strength. Do not seek its approval. Do not crave its praise. Walk through its cities as a ghost that sees their illusions clearly. Speak its language when useful, but never let it colonize your mind. Learn everything, imitate nothing, and remember that freedom is not the absence of constraint, but the mastery of it. For in a world that teaches obedience, to teach yourself is the purest act of defiance and the truest expression of power. Consider the scholar who questioned his university's dogma and was expelled, only to build a new philosophy from the ashes of his disgrace. His exile gave him clarity. His isolation gave him originality. The institution that silenced him decayed within decades, while his writings outlived King. The system had tried to erase him because it could not control him, and what it cannot control, it seeks to destroy. This pattern is eternal. It appears in every domain. The artist who refuses to commercialize his vision, the inventor who rejects investors' terms, the soldier who disobeys an unjust command. Each becomes an inconvenience to order, because they prove that discipline and conscience can coexist without obedience. The world will always disguise its fear of independence as moral concern. It will say, he refuses to collaborate, he resists authority, he endangers unity. But unity built on submission is not harmony, it is stagnation. The self-taught man brings friction, and friction produces movement. His presence exposes how hollow the rituals of competence have become. A world addicted to procedure will always resent the man who achieves results without following its scripts. His methods are unorthodox, his rise unapproved, his success unaccounted for, and that terrifies those who built their identity on legitimacy. Look at the marketplace. Corporations design positions for specialists, not thinkers. They praise creativity in words but punish it in action. The worker who questions inefficiency becomes a threat. The one who follows the manual becomes a model employee. The system survives not by merit, but by obedience disguised as professionalism. The self-taught mind, who learns faster than hierarchy allows, disrupts this rhythm. He shortens the distance between problem and solution, and in doing so, exposes the slowness of the machine. They call him reckless, but what they mean is uncontrollable. You can see it in politics, where conformity masquerades as stability. Those who rise through self-instruction are unpredictable. They owe no patronage, no allegiance, no debt to the networks that manufacture careers. They are immune to flattery because their legitimacy comes from competence, not approval. Such leaders cannot be blackmailed because their power was not granted, it was earned. And that, in the theater of politics, is intolerable. For politics feeds on dependency, favors exchanged, debts repaid, loyalties traded like currency. The self-taught man brings a new economy, one based on merit, not manipulation. That is why the system must isolate him before others notice that corruption is not inevitable, merely convenient. In art, it is the same. The painter who teaches himself to see the world differently will always offend those trained to reproduce it faithfully. His colors break the rules. His forms disobey proportion. His vision dismantles tradition. Critics will call him naive until the world adapts to his perspective. Then, years later, the same institutions that rejected him will build museums in his name. The system always consumes its rebels after death, not to honor them, but to neutralize their threat by transforming it into nostalgia. Even in religion, the self-taught spirit is exiled. Mystics who find God without priests, who hear truth without scripture, are branded as heretics. Why? Because they bypass mediation. They discover that the divine does not need an intermediary. And the moment faith becomes direct, the institution loses its authority. The same logic applies to knowledge, art, power, and love. The gatekeepers hate what they cannot gate. The self-taught man is the heretic of every system, and heretics are not tolerated until their ashes turn to monuments. Look deeper still into the digital empire of today. The new system no longer wears crowns or robes. It hides behind algorithms and data. It does not imprison with walls, but with distraction. It does not censor with silence, but with noise. It manufactures conformity by feeding each mind its own illusion of uniqueness. But the self-taught mind sees through this too. He studies not only information, but intention. He recognizes how platforms condition attention, how trends dictate identity, how outrage becomes a form of control. He learns to step back, to think in silence, to detach from the rhythm of manipulation. In a world that rewards visibility, he cultivates invisibility, and that makes him unstoppable. In science, the self-taught are the ones who see patterns before models exist. They do not wait for permission to experiment. They make laboratories out of failure. They are ridiculed by committees until their theories rewrite the textbooks. The system hates them not because they are wrong, but because they succeed without consensus. Consensus is the system's shield, the illusion that truth is decided by vote. The self-taught prove that progress often begins as disobedience to established knowledge. Even in the smallest corners of life, a craftsman perfecting his art without credentials, a poor man mastering languages without school, a woman teaching herself law to defend her rights, the pattern repeats. The world resists them, not because it doubts their ability, but because their independence humiliates the train. Their very existence questions the legitimacy of institutions built on exclusivity. The system can forgive failure, but never irrelevance. And nothing makes it more irrelevant than a free mind succeeding without its blessing. The lesson is not that systems are evil, they are necessary for order. But when order becomes a substitute for truth, when structure becomes more sacred than progress, the system transforms into a cage disguised as civilization. It begins to worship its own procedures and forget its purpose. The self-taught man reminds it of that purpose, and for this he is punished. He is the conscience of every dying institution, the storm that precedes renewal. So when you see someone mocked for learning in solitude, understand what is truly being mocked. The terror of a world realizing it no longer controls the means of enlightenment. When you hear them call someone unqualified, understand what qualification really means. Allegiance, not understanding. When you witness systems crumble, remember that it was not rebellion that killed them, but the slow corrosion of truth by bureaucracy. And when the ruins settle, the self-taught will be there rebuilding quietly, without applause, without permission, as they always have. For every generation must rediscover the same truth. The system does not hate you for ignorance. It hates you for awakening. And once you have awakened, you can never be lulled back to sleep. The system hates self-taught people because they are the proof that freedom can exist within captivity. Their existence reveals that the architecture of control is not absolute, that the fortress of authority has cracks wide enough for the will to slip through. They are the reminder that mastery does not require permission, and that knowledge once detached from institutions becomes uncontrollable. The system survives not through oppression, but through the illusion that learning must be sanctioned, that growth must be guided, that wisdom must be conferred. The self-taught breaks this illusion effortlessly. He shows that all structure is voluntary, that the walls of the classroom extend only as far as one's fear allows. The self-taught are an insult to the machinery of obedience because they expose how fragile it truly is. The system feeds on dependency. It must convince every individual that without it, he is incomplete. It must transform education into certification and curiosity into currency. But the self-taught refuses both. He turns his mind into a sovereign state, immune to its taxation. He learns not to climb their ladders, but to build his own. And in doing so, he undermines the economic foundation of modern control, the trade between compliance and validation. For what can be sold to a man who creates his own worth? The hatred is not ideological, it is structural. Systems function through hierarchy, and hierarchy demands intermediaries, experts, authorities, bureaucrats to preserve its legitimacy. The self-taught erases the need for them. He removes the middlemen of truth. He proves that wisdom is not owned, that it flows freely to those who pursue it with discipline. His independence diminishes the value of gatekeeping, which is the system's true product. Once people realize they can learn without the priesthood of power, the system's influence dissolves. It cannot profit from what it cannot mediate. Every institution at its core depends on ritual. Degrees, titles, ranks, and offices are not symbols of enlightenment, they are signals of belonging. They exist to remind the individual that he is part of something larger, that his worth is defined by external recognition. The self-taught violates this contract. He strips ritual of its authority. He learns, but does not kneel. He knows, but does not belong. His mind becomes untethered from the symbols that bind others. To the system, such a person is a contagion not because he spreads rebellion, but because he spreads possibility. The self-taught threatens the system's monopoly on meaning. He learns not what to think, but how to think, and in that lies the true danger. Systems can endure opposition, but not reinterpretation. To challenge them with force is to affirm their importance. To outgrow them is to make them obsolete. The self-taught is a living argument that authority is a choice, that control only persists where individuals surrender curiosity. He reminds the world that submission is learned, not inherited, that every man was once born, self-taught a child, discovering language without permission, perception without direction, wonder without rules. The system hates this memory. It seeks to erase the primal instinct of self-learning, to replace it with dependency. It must make knowledge seem scarce, difficult, unreachable without initiation. It must turn learning into an institution, so that thought becomes a privilege instead of a birthright. That is why the self-taught is not merely disliked, but feared because he reawakens the natural genius of mankind, the capacity to evolve without external permission. He embodies the most subversive idea of all, that freedom begins in thought, and that thought requires no master. The system's hatred is also practical. It cannot predict or control a mind that educates itself. The self-taught is outside its models, beyond its algorithms, impervious to its conditioning. He consumes information without the filters of propaganda. He analyzes motives rather than messages. He is not swayed by slogans or statistics because he studies the architecture behind them. He sees patterns the system would rather remain invisible, how fear becomes policy, how distraction becomes governance, how dependence becomes culture. His clarity disrupts the machinery of manipulation. That is why the system must drown him in noise, label him eccentric, question his credibility. It must do anything to obscure his clarity, because clarity is contagious. What the system truly fears is that others might begin to emulate him, that curiosity might spread faster than control, that individuals might realize they are capable of self-direction, of forming judgment without instruction, that the invisible leash might dissolve the moment it is noticed. The self-taught does not rebel outwardly. His rebellion is inward, quiet, methodical, relentless. And that is the most dangerous form of resistance, one that does not declare war, but simply withdraws consent. To be self-taught, then, is to practice political defiance disguised as personal growth. It is to reclaim sovereignty over one's own perception. It is to remind the world that power begins in the mind, and that whoever controls the process of learning controls the future. The system hates the self-taught, not because they destroy it, but because they make it unnecessary. They are not enemies of order. They are evidence that order can exist without oppression. They do not overthrow governments, they outgrow them. They are the quiet revolution that cannot be televised, legislated, or contained. And that is why the hatred is eternal. For every age constructs a system to protect its illusions, and every generation produces those who see through them. The self-taught are the recurring plague of control, the reminder that no authority is permanent, no ideology immune to question, no empire too vast for thought to penetrate. The system hates them because they are the beginning of its end, not through rebellion, but through understanding. For in the final analysis, knowledge is the one kingdom where no ruler can reign forever. The system despises the self-taught because he operates by a law of necessity rather than permission. He does not move according to decree, but to outcome. His loyalty is to the result, not to the hierarchy. In this, he mirrors the true ruler, one who understands that appearance sustains power, but only intelligence preserves it. The system, by contrast, is built to protect appearances even at the expense of truth. It needs its participants to confuse virtue with compliance, morality with silence, and order with stagnation. The self-taught exposes this illusion by acting without ceremony, by cutting through the ritual of obedience with the precision of reason. He is not restrained by inherited limits. His wisdom is earned through trial, not inherited through custom. Every system fears those who have learned from experience, for experience is a teacher that cannot be bribed. It leaves no room for deception, no space for comfortable ignorance. The self-taught man is the child of necessity, and necessity breeds cunning. He observes, he adapts, he perfects. While others wait for instructions, he moves according to circumstance. This agility makes him unpredictable, and in politics, unpredictability is the seed of instability. The rulers of systems prefer citizens who act like well-trained soldiers in peacetime, disciplined, unquestioning, steady. But the self-taught fights like a mercenary, sharp, resourceful, and loyal only to his purpose. There is danger in such independence. A ruler who cannot command minds must control them. He must suppress any method of thought that escapes his reach. And so the system fashions invisible chains, policies disguised as protection, rewards disguised as opportunity, education disguised as enlightenment. These instruments do not strike the body, they domesticate the mind. The self-taught, however, slips through their grasp because he sees the mechanism of control itself. He does not seek favor, he seeks mastery, and mastery, once achieved, does not kneel. A state can survive dissent, but it cannot survive independence of thought. Dissent can be punished, but independence must be imitated, and imitation threatens hierarchy. The self-taught becomes a model too dangerous to ignore. He proves that self-sufficiency is possible within tyranny, that autonomy can exist under surveillance. Thus, the system is forced to destroy him publicly or absorb him privately. If he resists, he is branded disloyal. If he yields, he is paraded as proof that freedom and control can coexist. In both outcomes, the system seeks to neutralize what it cannot comprehend, the mind that governs itself. Yet even rulers, if they are wise, learn from the self-taught. They recognize in him the mirror of their own solitude. For every prince who has ruled effectively has been, in spirit, self-taught, forced by necessity to understand men rather than rely on philosophers. Fortune favors not the obedient, but the observant. The self-taught shares this quality. He watches where others speak, he learns where others boast, he acts where others hesitate. In him lies the art of survival stripped of illusion, the art every ruler must eventually master or perish. The system hates the self-taught not only because he disobeys, but because he competes. He steals the monopoly of interpretation. He rewrites the language of power. When he speaks, he weakens the authority of tradition, for his insight is not borrowed but born. He reminds society that the source of greatness is not inheritance, but initiative, and this reminder is dangerous to every established order, for it awakens ambition in the ruled, that ancient fire that no government can permanently extinguish. When the self-taught man enters the arena, the balance of power trembles. He cannot be flattered by titles nor controlled by fear. The system depends on the predictability of pride and vanity, yet he has conquered both in solitude. He measures success not by applause, but by effect. His loyalty is to necessity, the only principle that endures when morality collapses. To such a man, praise is irrelevant and punishment inconsequential. The system cannot manipulate what it cannot seduce or terrify. It is for this reason that systems prefer the illusion of equality over the reality of excellence. Equality pacifies ambition, whereas excellence provokes it. The self-taught embodies the latter. He proves that nature distributes potential unevenly, but that will refines it perfectly. He disrupts the peace of mediocrity that keeps societies orderly. And though he may not seek to overthrow the hierarchy, his mere existence weakens its justification. When people witness competence unblessed by institution, they begin to question authority itself. The system's hatred, therefore, is not emotional, it is strategic. It understands that one independent mind can ignite a chain of others. The contagion of thought is more dangerous than rebellion, for rebellion dies with its leader, but thought multiplies in silence. The self-taught does not need followers. He produces imitators. His influence spreads not by command, but by example, and the system cannot imprison an example, it can only erase it. But erasure has never been permanent. Once an idea has proven its strength in isolation, it will find its moment. Just as a seed lies dormant until the storm passes, the thought born in solitude waits until the world is weak enough to hear it. The system may win for a time, but its victory is always temporary. The self-taught, by existing outside its logic, ensures its eventual decay. For this reason, every ruler who seeks longevity must learn from those the system rejects. He must understand that innovation comes from the margins, not the center, that renewal is born from exile, not privilege. The self-taught are not enemies of order. They are its inevitable successors. The system can destroy them as individuals, but never as a force. For as long as control exists, curiosity will seek its escape. And as long as man remains capable of thought, he will produce minds that teach themselves how to be free. The rulers of tomorrow will not inherit their crowns. They will forge them in solitude, and when they do, they will not ask to be loved by the system only to outlast it. In time, the self-taught becomes the true competitor of institutions. His method is lean, his intellect sharpened by scarcity, his ambition purified by exclusion. He is not distracted by bureaucracy, not burdened by committees, not softened by comfort. The very hardships designed to break him have become the instruments of his refinement. Where institutions grow complacent in their abundance, the self-taught thrives on necessity. He learns the most ancient law of power, that struggle is the only true tutor, and that ease is the mother of decay. The system fears him because it cannot reproduce him. It can only manufacture copies, never originals. He does not seek followers, for he understands that imitation corrupts the purity of independence. What he seeks instead is mastery, mastery over his craft, his mind, and his instincts. He studies men not from books, but from the theater of life. He recognizes patterns in behavior long before theorists give them names. He learns that human nature changes less than politics pretend. He sees that ambition, fear, and desire remain the pillars upon which all authority is built. And with this knowledge, he moves with a precision that terrifies rulers and fascinates the ruled. He is not moral in the public sense. He is effective. The system hates him because he does not confuse morality with strength. He uses morality as a tool when it serves the end, and abandons it when it hinders necessity. This does not make him wicked, only honest. For in every age, the system must dress its weakness in virtue. It condemns what it cannot match. It accuses the self-taught of arrogance, of opportunism, of selfishness, because these are the qualities it secretly admires and desperately needs. But beneath the insult lies admiration. The self-taught man becomes the archetype of the ungovernable proof that willpower can replace inheritance, that clarity can replace position, that discipline can replace privilege. Such men are not created in classrooms. They are tempered in isolation, where thought hardens into conviction and conviction into skill. They are driven by a hunger that systems cannot simulate, the hunger of one who must earn every inch of wisdom by experience. And though the system may surround him with hostility, it cannot outlast him, for institutions decay from within. But the self-taught renews himself continually. He needs no doctrine, no audience, no applause. His education never ends. because his curiosity is never satisfied. A ruler who understands this kind of man will see both the danger and the opportunity he presents. If the wise prince cannot destroy the self-taught, he must employ him, for while loyalty can be bought, genius cannot. The self-taught serves not out of devotion but out of purpose, and if that purpose aligns with the state, he becomes its most valuable asset. But woe to the ruler who offends him, for he cannot be replaced. He will turn his insight inward, and his understanding of the system will become the blueprint of its undoing. Systems crumble not because of external enemies, but because of internal blindness. They rot when those within them stop learning. The self-taught is immune to this decay. He is always studying, always adapting. His strength lies in movement, while the system's strength lies in repetition. And in the long march of time, repetition always yields to adaptation. Thus, the self-taught is not simply a threat, he is evolution itself. He is the mechanism by which civilizations renew their vitality, even as they curse him in their decline. You must understand that hatred of the self-taught is not hatred of the man, but of what he represents, the truth that control is temporary, that hierarchy is fragile, that institutions are mortal. Every generation builds systems to stabilize its fears, and every generation produces individuals who transcend them. It is the rhythm of history, as inevitable as night following day. The self-taught stands at the threshold of that transition, the moment when obedience withers and necessity reclaims its throne. When the system collapses, it will be the self-taught who rebuilds. He will not restore the old order. He will design a new one that mirrors his own understanding of necessity. For he knows that the world must be governed not by sentiment, but by structure, not by words, but by will. He will shape a new hierarchy, one that rewards competence over compliance. And in time, even his order will grow rigid, and new self-taught minds will rise to dismantle it again. Thus the cycle continues. Power births its own destroyers, and wisdom renews itself in defiance of control. In this lies the deepest irony. The system needs the self-taught as much as it despises him. Without his disruption, it would stagnate into ruin. Without his innovation, it would fossilize into ritual. The self-taught is both its enemy and its salvation, the necessary heretic who reminds power of its mortality. And though he may be hunted, silenced, or forgotten, his ideas endure, moving silently through generations until they find another restless mind to inhabit. Therefore, every ruler should study the nature of such men. They are the true weather of the political world, unpredictable, unstoppable, and indifferent to decree. You cannot command the wind, but you can learn to sail with it. To suppress the self-taught is to suffocate renewal. To harness him is to extend your reign. For only those who learn without permission can see beyond the illusions that govern the obedient. And only those who see beyond illusion can govern reality itself. The self-taught mind, once awakened, moves like a silent force beneath the surface of civilization. He has no need to announce his defiance, for his very existence is an act of rebellion against the architecture of dependency. He carries within him a sovereignty that no law can regulate, no policy can predict. The system hates him because he exposes its frailty, that the entire edifice of control depends not on force, but on belief. The belief that knowledge must be granted, that advancement must be approved, that worth must be certified. The self-taught dissolves that illusion simply by learning in silence. His is a power born from observation rather than inheritance. While others wait to be told what is true, he studies the gap between words and outcomes. He learns that truth in politics is never what is spoken, but what is achieved. And with this realization, he becomes immune to manipulation. He listens to speeches and hears strategy. He watches morality paraded in public and sees calculation behind it. The system cannot tolerate such clarity, because clarity breeds control, and control, in the hands of the individual, is the end of mass obedience. The self-taught mind is a mirror that reflects not the glory, but the decay of power. He reminds the world that systems are maintained not by genius, but by conformity. He does not rage against it. He simply withdraws his submission. That withdrawal, invisible yet absolute, is what terrifies rulers. For no authority can survive once people stop believing in its necessity. The system will continue to vilify him. It will call him uncooperative, dangerous, unbalanced, but these are the words of weakness defending itself. In truth, he is what keeps civilization from sinking into paralysis. His independence keeps the wheel of progress turning when institutions rust in complacency. The system may triumph for a time, but it will always return to the hands of those who learned without permission. For knowledge that is owned cannot endure. Only knowledge that is earned can shape the future. And the self-taught man, forged in solitude, disciplined by necessity, and guided by reason, will always rise from beneath the ruins of fallen orders to build anew. His mind is his kingdom, his will his law, his clarity his crown. And it is precisely because the system cannot rule him that it must one day answer to him. Power, at its root, has always feared what it cannot manufacture. The system hates the self-taught because he represents a truth that no empire, no ideology, no government has ever been able to conquer, that the human mind, once awakened, is beyond all control. He does not need validation to exist, nor recognition to endure. His education was written in solitude, his victories forged in the fire of necessity. And so, while systems rise and fall, while titles rot and banners fade, he remains. The self-taught endures because he learns from the collapse itself. He does not cling to the past. He studies it, extracts its lessons, and moves forward while others mourn the ruins of their illusions. The world calls him dangerous because he cannot be manipulated with promises or threats. He seeks neither power nor pity, only understanding. And in that understanding lies an authority greater than any crown, for it is not borrowed, but earned. The system fears him because he reminds humanity that freedom is not granted by law, but claimed by will. He is not against order, he is beyond it. He knows that true mastery is internal, that one who governs himself cannot be ruled. One day, the systems that mock him will wither under their own weight. Their doctrines will become hollow, their rituals irrelevant, their hierarchies obsolete. And from those ruins, as always, will emerge the minds that never asked for permission to think. They will build again, not for glory, but from necessity, not from ideology, but from clarity. Civilization will renew itself as it always has, not through reform decreed from above, but through wisdom rediscovered below. Remember this: no power endures that seeks to enslave thought. For thought is the one kingdom where rebellion is eternal, and the self-taught are its rulers. They are the quiet architects of every new dawn, the unacknowledged legislators of survival. The system may suppress them, ridicule them, erase their names from its records, but it will always live upon their ideas. And so, the true ruler of every age is not the one who commands armies, nor the one who sits upon a throne, but the one who teaches himself how to see. For in the end, the mind that learns without permission is the only mind that cannot be conquered.